Today we are going to get messages for you. Wow, look at that. They're already coming out. Messages for you from Spirit at the time you find this video. Planning on 3 cards here and looking at the bottom of the deck as well. So one more card, please, for the viewer at the time they find this video. Okay, wow. So we have got the 4 of Voices, which is the 4 of Swords in a standard deck. The Page of Inspiration, which is the Page of Wands, the 9 of Inspiration, which is the 9 of Wands, and then Awakening at the bottom of the deck, which is the Judgment card in this standard depiction of tarot. Okay, wow, so there's a really beautiful, straightforward message that wants to come through, but first I just want to take a peek here. The Magician and the 10 of Pentacles under the Awakening card. Oh, that's beautiful. So let's start with the bottom of the deck, shall we? Bottom of the deck to me often symbolizes just like the underlying energy throughout the entire reading. Another way I think of it is like kind of the why behind the what. You know, the what is typically what comes out in the spread, and this is sort of the why. So at the bottom of the deck, we've got Judgment or the Awakening, the Magician, and 10 of Pentacles, 10 of Materials. So let's talk about these 3 cards. Starting with the Awakening card, there's definitely a this reading might be for you if you've been wanting more and more to awaken, or maybe even if like you haven't, but you have been awakening. So maybe it feels as though life has thrust upon you an awakening journey, which isn't always pleasant in the short run. I think it's always, or a part of me knows it's always worth it in the long run. And I feel like that's what these cards under the Awakening card are showing, the Magician and the 10 of Pentacles, because, and maybe this reading, as I'm speaking all this out, it seems like it is for somebody who feels as though the awakening journey has been thrust upon them. Ultimately, I don't think that's ever the case. I think we always, at some level of our being, consent to our hero's or heroine journey, where we're willing to go into the unknown. We're willing to face those deep, dark parts of us that at some point were unconscious. We're willing to bring them to consciousness. We're willing to awaken to different ways of being, awaken to face ourselves, and awaken to where we might be causing our own issues. We're willing to awaken to different beliefs and definitions that are more in alignment with the laws of the universe, the laws of Mother Nature, and our innate self. So I do believe always at some level of our being we consent to that journey, right? And I know that it's been my experience that sometimes it's not necessarily the conscious part of me that is consenting. And so it can feel like the awakening journey is thrust upon us, right? And however your awakening journey is feeling in the short term, I think there's a reason I really wanted to look under the Awakening card, and to see the Magician and the 10 of Pentacles right under the Awakening is saying that in the long run, it is always worth it. And as I mentioned before, as I alluded to before, I think that's the case really for any awakening journey. In the short term, it usually is incredibly uncomfortable. And by short term, I don't necessarily just mean like hours and weeks. I think the awakening journey is quite a bit longer than we think, usually in the realm of years, right? And to a certain extent, we're always doing it. And if we look at what, a short-term discomfort of a few years can change an entire trajectory of a lifetime, and then maybe even generations ahead. In that regard, it is short-term. Does that make sense? And it might be helpful for you to think in those terms. So maybe thinking like broadening your timeline a little bit in your healing journey and your awakening journey might be helpful. Because what it is helping you do is tap into your resourcefulness and your magic. So the Magician card is one that represents like a person who is able to ground magic in a very practical sense. So there I guess resourcefulness is what wants to come through in this reading, like a really grounded but magical resourcefulness. And do you see how there's like an alignment going on here? Like she's aligning with the law again, like what did I say before? The laws of the universe, the laws of Mother Nature, and the laws of your innate self, which is part of, or is what really makes the magician, right? And that takes a lot of awakening to awaken to what are the actual laws of the universe? What is actually my innate self? What are the laws and the principles of Mother Nature? What do I need to unlearn and what do I need to learn? And with that resourcefulness in place, because of that alignment, then you create the Ten of Pentacles. And the Ten of Pentacles is such a beautiful, beautiful card of that, this resourcefulness like coming to fruition and reaping harvest over long periods of time, like generations ahead. So I just like love this bottom of the deck for you. And in my own way, I can resonate with this story. I think there has been such an initiation about my healing, and I'm getting that sense with this awakening card. Like, awakening sounds great, right? But most of the time, as is happening in my life, it hasn't felt great. It's felt more like an initiation. I know that initiation has been imperative to my life feeling more and more great now and moving forward. And so there's like this paradox I think we have to hold with this healing, with the awakening journey, with the healing journey. And that is that although like healing, what am I trying to say? It's like there's such beauty and gentleness to healing, but there's also initiation in it. Do you know what I mean? And our willingness to heal is all that's required. And that healing doesn't always feel good. I'm thinking about the like when you're like frostbite, or your limbs or your fingers are going to get frostbite, or I think even hypothermia. I've heard it said, this never happened to me personally, but I've heard it said that as you are warming up, the process of warming up is way more painful than it would be just to let your limbs freeze or your entire body freeze. Like, so there's a point where actually going into death is like, seems like it might be a better alternative than waking up and bringing yourself back to life, because in the process, that bridge it's very, very painful. It's very, very uncomfortable. And I'm definitely getting that sense here. But I think it's helpful to remember that, because I know in my own journey, I wish somebody would have told me sooner / more often that is just a part of the process. It doesn't mean you're doing it wrong. It actually means you're doing it right, not wrong. But sometimes it can feel so wrong, because all these ideas of who we were and all these ideas of what life was and how things worked are like crumbling. And so like we're reestablishing an entire different perspective and therefore foundation for our life. But in the midst of it, it just feels like crumbling, right? But the crumbling, the deconstructing is an important part of the rebuilding. And so definitely what wants to be said here is, if any of this is resonating, you are doing this process right, not wrong. With that said, let's get to some of these, or let's get to these cards here, which is like some messages from Spirit of more of like the what. And it's just really, it's so beautiful actually, because it starts off with the Four of Voices, which is the Four of Swords in a standard deck. And for some reason, I just like am loving this card with the roses. Look at how beautiful that is. So this is a very beautiful card of permission to, invitation to, request from Spirit to really focus on healing and resting, reflecting, meditating, healing, resting. There's what I love about the Four of Swords is it kind of encompasses like it's not like a vacation rest card. It's rest that promotes more healing. It's it's the reminder that within the healing journey, we need rest in order to integrate it. That when the healing / awakening journey is done well, or it doesn't even have to be done well, but when you're earnest about it, that rest is required, or it doesn't, nothing actually happens. We need rest as a part of this healing journey. And then it's followed by the page of inspiration, which is the page of wands, which I just sort of love because there's like a bit of like a serious contemplativeness to the Four of Swords. And then there's just a bit more of like a wildness, a rewilding, and open to fun new ideas that I'm getting from the page of wands. It's giving me, if any of this is resonating, you might want to check out a book called The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron. There's so many helpful things about that book, but one thing she talks about in that book is doing artist dates. So basically you're taking yourself on, a weekly, if that's too much, maybe a monthly date where you yourself and just yourself are thinking about what would be fun / creative for you to do. And you spend some time doing it. That's definitely given me this vibe because I think there's definitely a seriousness to the healing journey. There's, like we talked about, the initiation feeling, and it also isn't as serious as we think. And a lot of times, part of the healing comes through in the midst of that seriousness season, allowing ourselves some fun, allowing ourselves some play, allowing ourselves a perspective of like, what if I can hold the paradox of like, this is really serious and important, and I'm facing some really hard things and I really need to be contemplative and restful. And this also isn't as serious as I think. Do you know what I mean? Can you feel the power of that paradox? And then here we have this ending, this series, so to speak, is the Nine of Wands, which I just love because the Nine of Wands is like a hold your ground card. It is like it's a boundaries card. It is do what you need to do to protect yourself. And I just really love the energy of all of these three cards because it's been my experience that this is what is required of the awakening journey, of the healing journey, is this mix of like seriousness, contemplativeness, rest, with a bit of wildness, fun, everything's not so serious, with I need to protect my ability to contemplate and be wild and different than I've been before and get different ideas. And so there's a fire, like a passion for yourself. Don't you love the imagery of this one? Like a passion of protecting self is what I'm getting from this imagery. It's the orange dress is like, to me, is saying like sacral chakra, which is like this innate. There is like a self energy to it. It's less about the power of self, more about like the innate creative being that you are intended to be. There's a protection of that is required as you go through this process. And then I think it's been my experience more and more. I'm certainly still in the awakening journey. Again, I think it's probably lifelong, but I've done a lot of healing. I feel like I'm emerging from the healing journey a bit more versus being deep, dark within it. But it's been my experience that this is really needed. The Nine of Wands energy is really needed to protect your healing journey, to protect yourself as you're in the healing journey. But then it's almost as if it's not like then suddenly it's not needed. It's just more embodied. And so instead of having to muster up Nine of Wands energy, it's just more like embodied within you. You embody a sense of self-protection that once was not there. And I think that might be, one of the most beautiful rewards of the healing journey is this knowing that you are worthy of protection and an understanding that ultimately you're the only one who's going to save yourself. And that's going to be the case your whole life. Of course, other people come in and you can make great connections and be interdependent, but ultimately there's nobody who can trump your own sense of worthiness, can trump your own sense of how you feel about yourself. And so the more and more we can embody this worthiness, this protective energy of self, and not in like a defense mechanism protective way or in like a power over anybody protective way, but in just like this way that she's expressing it in this imagery. Isn't that, I mean, just like this more and more self is protected in my world. I just keep thinking as I'm saying all this, because a big part of my journey has been like awakening to who I actually am versus who I was conditioned to be. And then going through many, many stages of guilt and fear around it being okay to protect myself. And one thing I was listening to at one point that was really helpful, and it was an interview with a medical doctor. His name is Zach Bush. I'll link him up in the description box of this video. His work is really incredible because he went through his own awakening of being a very conventional Western medicine doctor to now being someone who is more and more aligning with the wisdom of nature, the wisdom of the universe, so on and so forth. But he has worked both in like palliative care and in birth work. So, you know, beginning of life, end of life. And one thing he said as a result of seeing that is he was talking about when he was in like hospice palliative care and how there were multiple times that people would be on their deathbeds. They would like think this person was dead. They would come back and they would all tell similar stories. And in it, they never lost their sense of self. He said that was what was never lost, was that they always in these like near-death experiences maintained their sense of self. And so he had always taken away that discovering yourself and like maintaining that sense of self must be an important aspect of life. And I remember like hearing that at whatever part or, you know, stage I was in my healing journey and finding it to be so healing because it was like a permission slip of like yourself is important. And I laugh because it's like, you know, of course it is, right? But we've been so conditioned in different ways in our culture, in our subcultures, in our families, that I think it actually takes a ton of awakening and a ton of healing to more and more be willing to stand in our self energy, be willing to protect it, and then baby step by baby step embodying that knowing within ourselves that that we are worthy of that experience of self energy, and we are worthy of that protection. And as I say protection, another thing coming through that I heard recently, and it definitely feels embodied in this Nine of Inspiration card, this Nine of Wand card in terms of the imagery, is protection isn't just about protecting something from harm. It's also about protecting someone's joy. And I think that's a beautiful permission slip too, right? Because it's taken me enough, it is currently still taking me, it has taken me a lot of work just to get to a point of like, I have the right to protect myself from harm. Specifically in my case, it was a lot of like just like emotional harm, right? And then there's a different level of protection that's like you also are worthy of protecting your joy, you know, which is really what I'm getting in this, like, again, this depiction of the, you know, beautiful orange dress. To me, again, it's just feeling like sacral chakra energy, protecting your flow, your freedom, your desire, your passion, your joy. So I'm going to leave it at that. This has been such a joy to read for you. If you are in the midst of this awakening, you are not alone. And definitely one of the main messages that wants to get through is you're doing it right, not wrong, even if it feels really wrong. And keep going on your earnest path of healing, as much as it can be uncomfortable in the short term. Don't forget what you have underneath this. You've got the Magician, the Ten of Pentacles. In the long term, it is always, always worth it.